So if you've downloaded the file and you have it in your downloads folder or wherever you download your file to, I think I've mentioned this a few times, but to get an image inside Photoshop, and this will, I guess, come in really handy also whenever we're doing photography, or if you just want to open an image inside Photoshop and you don't want to go through the process of like file open to find it. If you have the folder open, you can just click and drag it in, and then the image will open. Okay, so like I said, the end goal of this is to make sort of an abstract art piece where there's a reflective orb reflecting all of this scenery inside of it. So to start off, the first thing we're going to do is duplicate our layer because we will need that layer to be the mirror image. So we'll select our layer, hit Control J. You can also go to right-click duplicate. But whenever I talk to you about about how to do something, I try and teach you the hotkeys just because it makes your editing process a lot quicker if you get used to using them. So select your layer, hit Control J to duplicate it. And then we're back to using shape tools. So we're going to make sure we use our ellipsis tool here. And the fill should be set to black. And when you click and hold that shift key so it's a perfect circle. You can make the circle any size, but I think something that's a little larger is going to look nicer. And since I had my bottom layer selected and my circle's in the middle, you're not going to be able to see it. So once I have my circle, I'm going to turn this top layer off with the eye tool right here. If you didn't know, this is how you make layers visible or turn them invisible. So once I see my circle, as long as I have the snap key turned on, what you can do is I can hit Control T with my circle selected, and if I move it around, you'll see these pink guidelines that show up. So what this means when you get a pink line going down the center, both vertically and horizontally, that means that it's snapping to the center. This pink line is the center of the image. So for instance, if I move it off to the side, you'll see that pink line. This would be aligned horizontally with the center, and it would be just to the left of the center vertically. But if I move it to where the crosshair of those pink lines is in the middle of my circle is now exactly in the center of the image. So I'll hit enter. So my circle is in the center. I have the layer on top. I'm going to turn it back on. So we're at a state where we have a bottom layer that is our background that we won't really touch. We have a circle in the middle that is under this top layer, and we have the top layer, which is going to be our reflection of the image. So to make this image actually act as a reflection, the first thing we're going to do is, if there were actually a mirrored orb that was floating magically in the middle of this landscape, it would kind of refract the image in a way where it would distort the image on the edges, right? Because it would be a circular object that's reflecting something very flat. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Filter, Distort. Now, there are a lot of effects in the filter panel that you can play around with. But for the purpose of this project, we're just going to go to Filter, Distort, Spherize. And that's going to bring up... Where's my menu at? Oh, right here. It just took a while to pop up. So what this does is this kind of distorts the image and makes it bulge out in a spherical way. So with the amount set to 100 or the max, I'm going to hit OK. And that's going to make our image look distorted, like there was a sphere kind of magnifying it in the center. Now from this state, all we have to do is kind of match up this top layer to this ellipsis down here. And once again, as long as you have in your view tab, if you have snap turned on, this is really easy. And you'll know it's turned on because there'll be a check beside it. So with this layer selected, I'm going to hit Control T. And I'm going to start dragging from a corner inward. So once I do that, I'm making this top image smaller. And if I drag it to the top of my circle, it should snap into place. If I click from the bottom and drag downwards, it's going to snap into place on the circle that's below it. So now we have a problem where if I start dragging from the sides, it's just going to shrink the whole image, and we don't want that. But if you hold Shift, you can actually resize your shape without maintaining its proportions. So if I hold my shift key and drag from the side, I'm going to be able to drag inwards until it snaps, and you'll just see it quite literally snap into place. You don't have to do anything special. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and it'll snap. And you'll get that pink line, it'll snap into place, and then now I have a square shape above my circle that exactly covers it on the outside. I can hit enter. And then this is where our layer mask comes into play. So your layer mask is, it's something that's going to cut out different parts of the image based on what is masked in and masked out. So if I hold the control key on my keyboard and I click the thumbnail of an image, so for instance, if I do that in the background, you get the selection box around the entire image because the background of the image is the full length. But if I control click on the thumbnail of my circle, I get a selection that is just of this circle. And again, that's just control clicking on the thumbnail. The thumbnail of your layer is the little image in your layer tab that kind of shows you what's inside that layer. So I control click the circle of my ellipsis layer, or the ellipse layer. And then if I select the top layer, which is our duplicate of the background, if I select that with this selection still here, you can see these, people call them marching ants. But kind of this like little animated selection box, or I guess it's a selection circle. If I click my layer mask key, which is down here in my layers tab, it looks like a black circle in the middle of a white rectangle. If I click that, it's going to mask out everything that is not inside the selection. And the way a layer mask works is you can apply a layer mask to a layer. Let me show you real quick. So if I don't click that box, and instead I don't have a selection at all, and I just turn on the layer mask, what's going to happen is it'll create a white mask here. Basically, everything that's white inside that mask, this little mask thumbnail, will show up. But then if I select my brush tool and I have it selected to black, anything that's black will kind of get masked out. So anything that's white is going to get masked in. Anything that's black is going to get masked out. So I'm going to redo that. I'm going to control click my ellipse layer. With my top layer selected, I'll click my layer mask button. So now I have a perfect circular mask that is making this image, or this part of the image masked in. And then all of the corners are masked out because they were not inside the selection. So if you see here, there's a white circle in the middle. That's what you can see. Anything that's in black, you can't see. And then from here, it's just a matter of kind of like fine tuning a few things to make sure that your image looks good. I'm going to start by adding some highlights and some shadows. So I will create a new layer, which is down here. There's a little plus button. I'm going to create a new layer. And once again, I'm going to control click that ellipse layer or my circle layer to make sure that anything I draw on outside of that selection is not going to show up. But if I draw inside of it, it will. So with my brush tool selected over here in my tab, I'm going to make sure that the hardness is set all the way to 0. And then the size is going to be something a little bit smaller than this. And as a tip, your P key on your keyboard, beside like right to the right of your P key, there is an open bracket key. And then to the right of that, there is a close bracket key. The close bracket key will make your brush larger, and the open bracket key will make it smaller. So the left one, the left bracket will make it smaller. The right bracket makes it larger. That's just useful for resizing your brush without having to come up here and click the size over and over again. You can just use these two bracket keys. And then also, if you can't see your brush, so the circle that I'm making larger and bigger, if you can't see that, you probably have caps lock turned on. If I turn caps lock on, I just see a crosshair. If I turn it off, I can then see my brush. So I'm going to make it kind of small. And again, I'm going to make sure the hardness is set to 0. I'm going to come down here with my foreground, which is this first color swatch down here in your color panel. With that set to black, I'm going to add some shadows down here. And then my background is already set to white. So if you have your foreground set to black and your background set to white, you can just press the X key on your keyboard to swap them around. That's what these little arrows do here as well. And if you ever want to default back to black and white, like let's say I had this set to red and blue. So I don't want to use blue or red because that doesn't make sense. But I can just click this little button right here to default them back to black and white. I think the D key also does that. So if I change this to blue and I hit D, yeah, so D resets these back to black and white, and then the X will swap them. So I used black down here for shadows. I'm going to use white up here for highlights. And then this is where sort of the layer blending modes are going to come into play. I'm going to go ahead and rename all my layers just so everything makes sense. So this is my background layer. This is my circle layer. This is my reflection layer. And this is going to be my highlights. And I'm just going to call it lighting. This is my lighting layer. So I have this really stark white and this really dark black. And what I can do to make those blend in a little nicer is your layers, or sorry, not your layer styles. Your blending options are right here. This drop-down box that says normal, if I click that, it brings up all of these. And you can look at these and see which one is the best. I think that overlay is going to look nice. Hard overlay, soft light. The lighten and darken ones make sense if you are trying to get specifically a highlight or a shadow. But since we're trying to do both, I think these down here in the lighting are going to look the best. So I'm going to actually set mine to overlay, which just will make it a little more transparent. If you look at normal, this is what normal looks like. Overlay makes it a little more transparent. And then I'm going to turn the opacity of the layer down, which is just going to make it a little more see-through. After that, I think a nice effect would be adding a small inner glow to this orb. So if I double click on my reflection layer to bring up the layer styles tab that you should be semi-familiar with at this point, we're actually going to use the inner glow style. And with that, we're going to make sure that it's set to screen. I'm going to turn the opacity up a little bit to maybe 75. And then you can play with the size to see what looks nice. But the goal is to make it to where it looks like there's a little ring of light around. Just like a little refraction of light. And then to kind of end this design, I would create a drop shadow. So you can do that, not the drop shadow that you used in the layer style maybe on the last project. But if I were to create a drop shadow right under this layer, a way to do that we kind of messed with already is we're going to create a new layer. And again, I would set my brush to black. So I could hit that D key on my keyboard to make the foreground color black. I have my brush selected. The hardness is 0. And I'm going to make my brush pretty big. Roughly the same size as this. And I'm just going to click twice. But since we created a new layer, I'm going to name this layer Shadow. Since we created a new layer, I can hit that Control T key again to resize this. And just like we did to shape that foreground layer to make it where we were editing it while not maintaining the proportions, if I use the Shift key, I can kind of flatten this down, drag it down here. I can maybe make it a little wider, make it a little flatter, drag it down. And you will actually want to drag this layer under the circle layer, but above your background layer. And then using our blending options again, I think that maybe hard light looks the best. And then I'll turn the opacity down just a little bit so that we have like a clear shadow under our circle. That's kind of what it would look like if light was hitting it from the top and creating a shadow at the bottom. And that's it. That's just like a quick run through of how to make this and make it look realistic. You can do a few things. Like for instance, if I wanted to kind of increase this effect, I could maybe make this layer a little bigger. The top layer, I could make it just a little bit bigger than the circle. So it kind of looked like there was a weird mirrored edge on the outside of it. You can also flip this layer horizontally. So if I go to edit, transform, vertically. because a lot of mirrors or reflections will mirror things. So if it were to be refracted, it might actually be upside down. But anyways, this is a quick, just like, this is how you get maybe a basic image and add an element in it that makes it look almost like an abstract work of art. And that's that. Once you are done, your layer order should be a lighting layer for a highlight and a shadow, a reflection layer, which is the duplicate layer of the background. You should have a circle layer under that that you're using to mask the reflection layer too. You should have a shadow under that. That's a drop shadow at the bottom, and then your background layer. And that's that. You would save this as a PSD and a PNG, export, and upload those to the project, and that would be your file. Like always, I'm going to export this and upload it so you can follow along at your own pace, and then I'll walk around and answer questions as people need help.